No, I've never been to Supercuts.
Are you above it though? Do you look down on the Supercuts?
No.
Because I got Supercut.
You look great.
Yeah.
It is a Supercut.
I swear on the fucking Bible, this Iranian lady cut my hair in 5 minutes.
Hell yeah, dude.
I swear to God.
That's whenever I get my hair cut, I go into the place and I just go for a walk-in, so just anybody cuts my hair. But I did like back in the day when I had a specific person I would go to month after month after month, and I'd be out of there in 5-10 minutes.
And I tell you what, she wasn't even going to talk to me.
Hell yeah, dude.
I talked to her, and she told me all about her being from Iran and wanting to be a hairstylist, and her family being like, yeah, women just don't do that. And then she was like, yeah, and then I moved to America, and they don't care over here,
I think that might be the thing that prevents me the most from getting a haircut.
Yeah.
Is having to talk to people, because it's always, oh, did you catch the Lions? No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I'm not a big sports guy. Oh, well, it was quite a game.
Yeah.
Cut my hair.
Just So for reference, while I was driving, I sent a text at 5:19 to Alicia. The place was 6-7 minutes from there, which means that I probably got there sometime between 5:25 and 5:30, right? At 5:40, I sent her a video of what my haircut was from the car. I'd already been back in the car.
Sounds very much so like you're setting up an alibi for something.
And then Alicia says at 5:42 p.m. on August 15th, that was quick! Exclamation point, exclamation point. And I was like, yeah, she chopped me quick. I said that at 8:42 as well. I'm telling you, it was actually super. it was actually a super cut. I sat down and she was like, what do you want? And I was like, yeah,
shorter.
Long on the top, short on the sides. It's what every guy gets. No guy asks for a different haircut. Unless you're getting a mullet.
I very much so do need a haircut. I know I've been saying it for 9 months, but I'm very serious about it now.
Yeah.
I do like the longer hair on me, and I'm going to keep it. But that's my big problem right now is I don't know what to tell them. Yeah. Just shorter, but also...
Yeah, I think about that all the time when I'm getting if I wanted to have long hair, I think about well, you gotta also maintain it, right?
Yeah.
But fuck, I am so cheap that if I walked into a barbershop and paid $25 for my hair to be a quarter inch, half inch shorter, basically, I'd be like, what was the point?
I think I want more than that cut off.
Yeah.
And I'll probably do what I always do when I get a haircut is I let it go to a point where I'm like, oh, I look disgusting. And then I let it go another month. And then I go get a lot taken off. Yeah. But, every time I used to get my haircut when it was shorter, I would just go on and go 5 on the back and the sides, inch off the top. And that was all I needed to do. But now I'm like, up to here maybe, but also here a little less.
Yeah. What I want to do, and what I've done in the past, is document my hair when I like it. Yeah. And then that way, when next time I go to the barber, I'm like, make it look like this again.
From personal experience, I've done that.
Yeah.
Does not work.
Yeah, I know. Every haircut is just a little different.
Yeah.
Even if it's done by the same person.
And I hate it every time.
Yeah.
And then it grows out and it looks just a little different enough that I'm like, I like this.
Yeah.
It's a new me, but it's just a small variation on the same haircut. Yeah.
But on a side note, I also do exactly the same thing with the fucking... I just let it go because, again, I'm so cheap. I'm like, I want to get my fucking... I'm going to go in there looking like an asshole. And I'll look like an asshole for 3 months to make sure I really look like an asshole before you cut my hair.
Yeah.
Because I want to get my money's worth.
I'm making you work today.
Yeah. You'd see me in Dutch girl mode. I feel like I was in Dutch girl mode for the last month or so. I don't like my hair today. All this hair talk's making me hair conscious.
Yeah, me too.
Eating Soup Alone is a podcast hosted by me, Christopher Crumley, and co-hosted by Nicholas Johnson. We try our best to ramble incoherently about a handful of movies at least once a week.
So, Chris, we watched a bunch of movies.
Yes, but specifically we watched Magnolia. That's the film we'll be talking about today.
We did.
And,
yeah,
if you may remember, I think it might have made number 5 or 6. Not that they were numbered in any order.
Yeah.
On my top 100 movies of all time. It's a very important movie to me. And it also made number 5 on a list of the top 100 movies of the 1990s. Can't remember who put the list out. Might have been IMDb. Who knows?
Might have been you. Who knows?
It was also me.
Anyways. It was coincidentally like 96 on mine.
Yeah, well, because you
was
you were working up to the wire.
I was. I really was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were a couple that were getting a pass on the back end just because you'd seen them.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, did I put the Blues? Yeah, I put the fucking Blues Brothers on my list. But.
So how long have I been talking about this movie?
As long as I've known you, Chris.
Yeah.
I very distinctly. I knew the plot of Magnolia because I remember in our old house, like 4 years ago, you tell me about the Whiz Kid and John C. Reilly and stuff like that, and I think I like walked in on you watching it. But yeah, it's just that thing. It's goddamn 3 hours and 10 minutes, so I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
If this doesn't have an Iron Man and a Captain America punching each other for 3 hours,
well, on a side note, you know my stance on the 3 hour thing.
You know my stance.
But I tell you what, Fargo, I feel like could have done for another 20 minutes.
Yeah?
Yeah. We'll talk about it when we talk about Fargo. But anyways, Magnolia, another thing, just before we even get going, we're just getting a couple little things out of there. I've said it many times. You've heard me say this as well. I think it's got one of my favorite movie trailer. I think it's got my favorite movie trailer.
Oh, the trailer's fantastic.
It's so good.
It's got that stuff just for the trailer where it's them talking straight to the camera. Yeah. I love that. I think we've talked about this before, too. Love a good movie trailer.
Yeah. And I love the narrator coming in. And he's like, there is the story of the boy genius and the man in love and the dying father and yada, yada, yada. And then he's like, and this will all make sense in the end. And then the music gets louder. And it just gets crazy for a little while.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So do you have any opening remarks, I guess? Like, tell me a little bit about your experience. How'd you feel going into it? How long into it before you're like, oh, yeah. Those kinds of things.
I have heard about Magnolia a lot from you and other people, and the general consensus I've gotten from it is like, oh, you have to, it's a plan. You have to make a date to watch Magnolia.
Yeah.
And the other day it was what, like 9:15 at night?
And I was like, as a goof, kind of just like, let's put Magnolia on. The same way I just said to you, why don't we watch The Godfather?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's currently basically 10 o'clock.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, fuck it, let's watch Magnolia. And we watched Magnolia because I was like, oh, I need movies for this fucking list.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad I did. The movie starts with those like three... Is it three? Yeah, those three stories that have nothing to do with the movie. They're just stories about coincidences.
Yeah. I think, in a sense, it kind of reminds me of how The Conjuring starts with the small Annabelle story, right?
Yeah.
It primes you. It sets what. Actually, it's almost like the most blatant example I can think of like, basically like establishing where your suspension of disbelief should be.
Yeah,
you know
that's a great point. It's like that, but also different. The Conjuring reminds me of Pixar movies.
Okay.
I think Pixar does a lot is they show you your main character in their element. And with The Conjuring, it's like, here they are busting a case.
Yeah, almost like a Batman serial or something.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
In Magnolia, you don't see any of those people again. And how long does those three beginning stories take? Like what? Like less than 10 minutes?
Yeah, probably 5.
The first one they were talking about with Patton Oswalt getting impaled on the tree, I was like, I'm fucking in. This is so good. And I don't know if you saw me, but I was sitting, probably not for most of it because it's a 3-hour movie. I was kind of maxing on relaxing at some point, but I was like literally just sitting upright on the edge of the couch for a good portion of the movie.
Yeah.
I really, really, really enjoyed it. We're doing full spoilers in case you haven't seen Magnolia.
Full spoilers. I wish we had like some kind of. Oh, you know what?
What?
Let's just use the default iPhone alarm sound, just like Avengers. They weren't above it. Neither are we.
For what?
Spoiler warnings.
Oh, okay.
We'll edit that sound in. At one point you wanted to buy a soundboard.
I have one downloaded on my
sounds.
I have one downloaded on my phone, but I don't know how to hook that up to this.
Anyways, full spoilers.
Full spoilers. Tom Cruise dies at the end. Just kidding, he doesn't.
For a second I was like, wait a second, but yeah, you're right. That does not happen. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like I don't even know where to start with this movie.
I kind of do, I think.
Okay, give it to me.
One of the first things about it, barring the Avengers, how many ensemble cast movies have you seen, like of this caliber, where there's like 12 characters kind of like that?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah. I know Boogie Nights gets kind of close, but there's obviously like two main characters.
Yeah.
One of the first things about this movie that I feel like I want to mention is that it's a lot like a slice of life, but instead you're kind of like given the whole pie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't really. Movies are usually about someone's life, and this one just has this epic feeling of being about life for me.
Yeah.
I know that once you had finished, you said something to the effect of like, that wasn't really a movie that makes me feel like, oh, I got a lust for life or anything like that. And I wouldn't say it makes me feel that way either, but it's similar to that feeling where like I walk away with this bittersweet feeling of like, oh yeah, things aren't awesome. Everybody's got some shit. We're kind of all in it together. And then one day we probably kind of just die, but you know, we're in it together right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And, you know, I know exactly what you mean. There are movies that you walk away from and you are so steeped in that movie while you're watching it, it takes a while to shake off.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the big thing for me, and this isn't a negative, the frogs.
Yeah. Gotcha, yeah.
They take that away from me almost immediately, but it might be my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, you loved the frog part, yes.
I don't know if you saw me. I had the biggest smile on my fucking face.
It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful scene, yes.
Yeah.
I also like a little bit, even though it's a little corny, when Stanley Spector or whatever is like, this is something that happens. These things happen. Like when you're sitting in the library.
Yeah, because for this whole 3-hour movie, like I said, I'm so in, and I'm so invested in all these people's lives and everything that's going on. And they wait 3 hours and 4 minutes to just rain frogs from the sky, to just
and then basically roll credits.
And just basically roll credits, and it just, it's so fucking good. And I like, there's nothing else in the movie that's like even a little bit like mystical or like, I mean, the whole thing's biblical because it's just a loose retelling of Exodus 8:2, I believe, which we also noticed 8:2 is all over this movie. And yeah, for when it happens, just one or like I think 2 frogs fall on John C. Reilly's car, and I told you, I was like, oh, for sure they're gonna cut back in time 2 minutes. There's gonna be someone on the roof doing something like robbing a pet store or something like that, and someone accidentally throws a thing off the roof and it hits his car, and it's like, oh, it's like Exodus. But no, and then it just starts raining frogs everywhere, and it's so fucking good. I love it so much. My biggest takeaway with this, which is what I said to you when you were like, yeah, it makes me feel this way after watching it. The way it makes me feel after watching it is, fuck, I love movies so much. Because that is such a, like a, I can't think of another example, but they're just stuff that movies do where it's like, it's a movie. Okay.
Yeah.
This shit just happens.
Yeah.
It's like we were talking about John C. Reilly's character is always talking to himself in the car, and there's no explanation for it. He's not like recording into something or like doing a thing for his like online dating or whatever. He's just narrating to himself. And it's like, there's no explanation to it. It's just a good way to get inside of his head, and we're off. Because if it felt like an actual narration, it would feel a little off. But instead of him just talking in the car, it's like, okay, accept this. This is... Or the guy that was shooting at him that killed the guy at the beginning in the house. You never get an answer to that. You never get anything like that. It's just there. Again, it's another movie thing where it's like, no, we don't really need to tell you this. We don't really need to go into this.
Yeah.
It's not really the point. And I love it.
It also does that neat slice of life thing where like the whole movie is basically a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it keeps that tension because like it keeps switching between all like 12 of these stories or whatever, and it genuinely feels like they're all happening at the same time. And one of the things that I give this movie the most credit for is no one story takes precedent over another. They all feel equal. Every time we go back to another character, I'm like, oh, fuck yeah. What happens next? Except for, we agreed, kind of the whiz kid.
I'd say
a little bit.
Part,
yeah. But, I mean, out of how many stories they're trying to tell, for one of them to be a little weak, it's neither here nor there in my mind.
And it does feel a little sectioned for some of them.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good way to keep those, like, however many characters. Like Philip Seymour Hoffman. Can't think of her name. The wife.
I can't either, but I really like her character in this movie.
The husband. They all feel like one story. Tom Cruise is off by himself, but he ends up coming into that. The game show host and the whiz kid are their own story. And then John C. Reilly and the daughter are their own story that she kind of intersects, not kind of, she intersects into the game show host.
It is interesting, like, mapping out how it's all connected, though. Like, Earl Partridge, the dying dad, Tom Cruise's dad, owns the production company that Jimmy Gator puts his show on, which connects both of the Whiz Kids. But going back to, like, the Earl Partridge, you also have the wife connected, and then you have, what's his name? Philip Seymour Hoffman. And then with the Jimmy Gator stuff, oh yeah, it's his daughter that falls in love with John C. Reilly. And then am I leaving anybody out? Or is that kind of everybody?
I think that's pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I like how
it's interesting.
It's all connected like that, yeah.
But so loosely, even, because there's really the fact that Earl owns the production company is the only thing that really connects their story to everybody else. Everybody else is a little more connected, I suppose.
And I definitely thought it was gonna end with like all of them in the same room, and it's gonna come to a head in some way. And I'm glad it didn't.
Yeah, because that's another beautiful thing, because it makes you think again about life, right? It makes you think about the things going on around you, right?
Yeah.
And like, just the idea that like, I'm John C. Reilly to so many stories that branch like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with the girl I'm dating. I don't know what's going on with her dad. I don't know what's going on with the game show that he runs or his job or whatever, and how that involves this guy and that guy, and how this guy's in love with a bartender at this bar, and, you know, how the guy who owns the production company that my girlfriend's dad works for is dying and trying to reconnect with his son, and, you know, all those kinds of weird things, right? Just that the idea that all things are kind of connected. It becomes almost, you know, like a philosophy or like a religious thing again, right? It ties into that kind of.
Who would you say your favorite story beat is, or like, not story beat, favorite character, favorite section?
Favorite characters.
And you can break it up into like the things like I was saying, like these people are together and these people are together.
Gosh. Again, it just becomes so hard because I like, this is like a big picture movie to me, right? Like everything, like everything's like a small bit that works into it. But I guess for me, at the very end of the day, God,
who's your favorite and why is it John C. Reilly?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Is I feel like in my head, John C. Reilly still comes out as probably the closest thing we have to like the protagonist, and that's probably because he narrates, and that's probably because he sums the movie up at the end with his little, you know.
Yeah, with the exception of him and maybe Philip Seymour Hoffman, he's the only one that doesn't come off like a little bit of a piece of shit.
Yeah. Well, that's another neat thing the movie does, is like it makes you empathize with people who have done awful things. And again, it's more of a grander statement about life, right? Is that like we all do these awful things, right? Nobody in that movie besides, I guess, John C. Reilly and maybe like the girl who was molested by her father and the Wiz. Okay, never mind. But anyways, there are probably a lot of people who haven't done horribly fucked stuff. But I think still the message ends up being that most people have done some pretty terrible stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk a bit about maybe more specifically like, well, first you can answer. Is it John C. Reilly? Is that why you made that rib?
Yeah, probably.
But what I was trying to bridge over to is like, what are some like the kind of standout emotional beats? You mentioned like, I know you misspoke, but I am actually kind of interested in it. Like, I'll give you an example. I love when Jim loses his gun. And he's just talking out loud. He's like, "Where's the gun, Jim? Find the gun!" Like, I don't know. Everything about that works. John C. Reilly and how like actually panicked he sounds, and the fact that it's raining, and the fact that he was just shot at, and the fact that it's already established that he's a fuck up at his job, and that he's gonna be the laughingstock.
It's almost like the beginning of There Will Be Blood. Yeah. Because a television show that I will not name because the creator and star got. There's an entire episode of that show that is just that, of a cop losing his gun. Yeah. And just the whole episode is trying to find the gun. And yeah, that's just something that happens, and you're like, oh, fuck, and they kind of just move on from it.
Except at dinner, he had that emotional scene where he's like, "Today, I lost my gun, and I'm the laughingstock." You know, there's a lot of zooms in this also, on a side note. Yeah. I was immediately thinking of the scene where they kiss and it comes in real tight.
I think the biggest standout emotional moment for me is when Tom Cruise's dad is talking to Philip Seymour Hoffman and just confessing his regrets to him. Mm-hmm. And it's such an easy emotional thing. Like, just a dying man telling his hospice nurse like all of his life regrets, but it works so well.
Yeah.
Like, and especially when it cuts away from him back to other people and other things that are going on, and he's talking over it, just being like, they say life is short, it's not, it is long, and it's like, oh fuck it, he's like, I'm so full of regret.
Yeah.
And the love of my life, I cheated on her for 23 years, and then she died, and I made my son take care of her, and it's like, oh buddy, you're getting me. And then Philip Seymour Hoffman having to kill him is sad. Not kill him, but drop that shit in his mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, him with the gun works. I'd say the weakest one for me would probably be the Whiz Kid, the new Whiz Kid standing up to the host for himself.
Yeah, the piss the pants thing.
Because I know he's supposed to be very smart and well-read, but when he's just going off and he's talking, I'm like, no kid talks this way. Yeah, it's got to be that. It's got to be the dying man.
I'll also give shouts out to...
It's a tie between the dying man or his wife at the pharmacy.
I was going to say pharmacy. Yeah. That gets a shout out. Also, the daughter breaking down at the date. I like that a lot. Where she's talking about like the things you don't know about me and you're going to find them out. And like I do these awful, awful things. And we should really just walk away right here while I'm basically still like a good person in your mind. And like, let's just forget it. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it.
I'd say, sorry to interrupt you, but going back to what we were saying about everyone being a little bit shitty, I'd say that's probably the shittiest thing about John C. Reilly is how obsessed he is. Not obsessed, but like how can't see the forest for the trees with her specifically. And just how high she is 24/7, and he's so just, I guess, taken away by how beautiful she is.
But also a dummy, right? He's been established as a big dummy.
Yeah, and how he just wants to be in love so bad that he can't tell. Also, funny scene in the movie where she's making him coffee and stuff, and she's just so high, and he just keeps talking.
Yeah, the idea of putting yourself in those shoes of just being high as shit on cocaine, you're barely getting away with it, like by the skin of your teeth, and he just won't stop fucking.
Yeah.
And it also works because it's one of those things where, like, so much of this movie is like, you know, kind of gray or more complicated than it seems, and it's just so interesting, right? Because like, the reason why John C. Reilly is hanging out is because he doesn't necessarily believe her. He thinks it really was a domestic violence thing, and he's hanging out to make sure that the guy doesn't come back, right? So he doesn't have to answer the 187.
Yeah.
But also, it's 100% because he's head over heels with this girl and wants to ask her out, right? So it's both things at once, you know? Or just, for example, like you were talking about the old man talking about his regret and whatnot. And again, it like pulls on your heartstrings, and you're like, wow, look at this guy. He's just been torturing himself. He's made his own personal hell about his mistakes. But also, fuck this dude. He really did fuck Tom Cruise over so bad, you know? And then, I don't know, it's just interesting, like, you know, there are so many, like, little hints of, like, just so many different things. I guess it's not even a little hint. I guess there are so many different ways that the idea that, like, the past isn't, you know, done with you kind of plays out. Like, for example, you know, Tom Cruise kind of becomes, like, a supervillain version of his supervillain in his life, right? He becomes almost the way that he interprets his dad.
Yeah.
You know, this hyper masculine, no respect for women. Women are only good for fucking, right? And it's so odd, right? Because he hates his dad so much.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to be anything like that, and yet he ends up being just like that, right?
I mean, not even just like that. He's just the worst parts of him amplified times a million.
Yeah.
Just so repulsive. Just like.
So it's good for some dark humor, though.
Yeah, it gets me, but also at the same time, I'm like, oh boy, like I know that's the point, and it's supposed to be over the top, but at the same time, I'm like, dudes, there are for sure dudes today in 2021 who think like this.
Yeah.
And, I hate it.
Also, that guy's in Ghost Protocol. It's crazy that I can see a movie where Tom Cruise goes, respect the cock.
He's one of those. Tom Cruise is one of those movie stars that I feel a little bad for because he's a really, really, really good actor. Sometimes, and I feel like he doesn't get the credit he deserves.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but also sometimes definitely phoning it in.
Yeah, like something that always hits me really hard, except for this last time it didn't as much, but when he's finally getting a chance to just be like, fuck you to his dad.
Yeah.
And he's just crying and he's shaking, he's on the edge of his seat and he's like grinding his hands together and like you can hear the chair just keep squeaking. And he's like, I hope it hurts. I hope it fucking hurts, you know?
Yeah, and I don't know if I like or dislike his dad already being gone at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of me wanted, the entire time was like, oh, bro, just wake up for a second. Just wake up for a second and talk to him. And he doesn't. And now that I said it out loud, I think I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, real quick, perhaps now would be a good time for me to mention a couple of things that really stood out to me this time that maybe I didn't notice other times, or maybe I just forgotten between viewings. I've seen this movie a lot. But going back to the wife in the pharmacy, I caught this time, or at least it really stood out to me that time, when she specifically says to the pharmacist, who seems hell-bent on the idea that she's, just a, Hollywood, LA County, like, woman who's getting a bunch of drugs so she can stay high all the time.
Which she is.
Yes, but it's more complicated than that, right?
Yeah,
like, he's
exactly.
not seeing the bigger picture, right? He thinks she's just going to go off and party and whatever. And she's just like, fuck you. Who do you think you are? Who do you think I am? Calling me lady or whatever. And she says that thing where she's like, have you ever seen death in your house? Have you ever seen death in your bed? And she's like out of breath and stuff. Like the way that she's out of breath and she keeps like taking those sharp inhales. It's so like true to like when you like really blow up on somebody but you're not used to it, like you're so nervous that you're like
Yeah.
And she's like shaking and stuff. There's in her voice, even like just her voice alone.
So disrespectful. I'm looking up this lady's name because I love her at everything I've seen her in, but cannot for the life of me remember her goddamn name. Julianne Moore.
Yes, Julianne Moore kills the movie. Another thing that stood out to me a bit is, for all the tough talk that Tom Cruise and his buddies do, there are multiple scenes where they're very subordinate to women.
Oh yeah. Women
which
are
is great, and it's very much so one of those things where I'm like, yes, exactly. For example, the interviewer, she settle down, calm down, you missed a button, that kind of stuff. But then there's also the scene where I think her name is Janet.
The one on the phone?
Yes, and like Tom Cruise is like a right-hand man or whatever. She's like, go get him now, and he like comes to the top of the elevator. He's like, okay, I'm on the floor now. She's like, good boy, and like just talking to him like that and stuff,
Or even when Tom Cruise is on the phone with her and he's
and she's like, I am doing my fucking job.
he's like, I need you to do your fucking job, and she's like, I'm doing my job. I need you to answer me. It's like, so good. And I love I brought it up to you, but shot wise in this movie, I like when he's talking to the interviewer and she like finally gets him and he like kind of rages out and he gives up to leave, and it's the shot of the two of them sitting down and he stands up and the camera doesn't move, and so you see her and she's like eye to dick level with him, and it's such a that's just his personality, and he doesn't know how to overcome this, so it's just like a big masculine show of like, oh, I am man, I'm angry, I'm leaving, but illustrated in dick's eye level.
Yeah, and it's also a nice like as I was saying, body language tell.
Yeah,
when people feel like they're losing an argument, first thing they'll try to do is shout over them, not let the other person get a word in edgewise, and then also standing up, it like asserts dominance and whatnot. And then he does that fucking just huge piece of shit move where he shouts in her head, basically. Like he like gets down, he's like, fuck, like right by her head.
Yeah,
and it's like, what a fucking asshole thing to do. God damn. Another thing that stood out to me was just little things that like it's neat that like the character motivation, like it works so well that even on a couple of viewings, you just don't even necessarily think about it. Of course you notice it, but you don't even think about it. But for some reason this time I was like, oh yeah, it would make sense that Claudia would want to go out with this police officer because she's self-destructive. She wants to make the worst decisions possible. And what could be a worse decision when you're a cokehead than to date the cop who got called to your house?
I'd say about 45 minutes of footage in this 3-hour movie are just her doing cocaine. Something to that note of character motivations that I like, that it's just kind of peppered in. I brought it up to you. At the end, John C. Reilly sees William H. Macy climbing up that drain pipe, and he goes back to get him after he's just cleaned the place out. And the frogs start, and he gets them after he falls, and they hide in that gas station. And then it's over, and he tells them what he did. And he's like, all right, we're just going back in, and you're just putting the money back. And they, throughout the movie, pepper in, like, shots of his apartment where he's got a cross over his bed, and there's parts where he's praying and stuff like that. And they don't hit you over the head that he's a religious guy, but he is. And so, if anybody in this movie is going to see frogs falling from the sky and go, I gotta forgive this guy, this is for sure a sign, it's gonna be John C. Reilly's character.
Yeah, I also really do like the fact that when he falls off
He smashes his face in his
so
teeth,
now he
and so
actually
he
does
needs the
need,
braces.
yeah, he does need the money for real.
Oh, can we talk about Doc Ock and his assistant? Probably the funniest part of the fucking movie.
You got struck by lightning, Donnie.
You don't need braces. Bad idea.
Yeah. Doc Ock, you do have to see Boogie Nights.
Alfred Molina.
Yeah, he shows up as like the big bad in like the final act. Yeah, kind of a coke dealer type that Marky Mark and his buddy John C. Reilly get mixed up with. It's a very dangerous, intense scene because they're kind of hanging out there. I don't know if they owe him money or they're trying to score coke or something, but it's off. He's like wearing a silk robe and like nothing else and just hanging out with a bunch of guys with guns in a nice mansion.
I'd like to see Alfred Molina in more stuff. I'm sure he's in more movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love him in everything I see him in. Like I haven't seen Boogie Nights, but you telling me that, I could definitely see him as like a big scary coke dealer.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time, I could see him as the scientist from Spider-Man 2, or fucking the little guy helping Indiana Jones through the forest at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah,
he's a great. Not to derail it into a superhero movie, but I am for just a minute. I think the only part that really holds up for me for that second Spider-Man movie is Alfred Molina, especially at the beginning, when Peter goes to meet him.
When he's just Mr. Octopus.
When he
hasn't gotten his doctorate yet.
Yeah, he's just Mr. Octopus, and he's there with his wife. And he's like, "Oh, Peter Parker, Dr. Connors has told me about you. Brilliant yet lazy." And he's like, "Yeah, whatever," and they talk or whatever. And then at the end, after the big fight or whatever, he's got the big man-made sun in the bay and everything's crashing down or whatever, and Spider-Man jumps down and takes his mask off, and he's like, "You have to help me stop this thing." And he just stops for a second. He's like, "Peter Parker, brilliant yet lazy."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "Oh, that's so good. That's so good." It makes me cry a little bit every time I think about it. It's
very
great.
good.
Alfred Molina's great. Let's continue talking about Magnolia.
Well, just on a side note real quick, let's talk about Spider-Man 2.
Okay.
That Spider-Man iteration specifically, would you characterize that Peter Parker as lazy? I remember him being pretty... He was like going to school and on the school newspaper. Then he went to college, did pretty well, but was also delivering pizzas at the same time, like fighting crime at night.
Well, no, that's the thing about...
Oh, he comes off as lazy because he's up all night and he probably is bad at schoolwork.
They really drive it home in the beginning of Spider-Man 2 that he's
like dropping the ball.
He's never in class. He can't deliver pizzas on time. He can't pay his rent, stuff like that. Yeah,
dude, it's been so long since I've seen that movie.
That's my favorite thing about Spider-Man is Spider-Man is just probably
taking on more than he should.
Yeah, no, yeah, it is.
Because Batman's a billionaire, he could do nothing all day.
Yeah, exactly.
He could be up all night.
Yeah, whether it's intentional or not, Spider-Man is very much so like a metaphor for having depression, but instead of having depression, he has to be Spider-Man instead. And yeah, I think that I am stealing this from Patton Oswalt, who was in Magnolia. But he said something along the lines of Spider-Man being his favorite because Batman's like, "Oh, I got to figure out how to stop these bank robbers, but also I have to be at this charity ball." And Superman's like, "Oh, I got to stop this from flying into the sun or whatever." And Spider-Man's like, "I can't pay my fucking rent."
Just to speed through a couple of other things. Really hit me this time. Again, the Earl Partridge's big regret speech where he talks about use regret. He's like, "Fuck people who say live your life with no regrets. That's horse shit. You should regret things, and when you regret things, you should fucking do something about it."
Yep.
Another thing is how much his wife kind of mirrors Earl's journey, in the sense that Earl is a man who cheated on his wife, and then she died, and now he lives with this regret of like, "Oh, I really did love her." And the wife's in the same position where she cheated on Earl the whole time, and now that he's dying, she's fallen in love with him.
Yeah, and I love that scene with her and the lawyer, and she's like, "I don't want this. I don't want any of this money." And he's like, "Come back when you're not high." And she's like, "Fuck you, fuck you."
Yeah.
So good.
I will say we have been just loving this movie up, and I think it deserves it, but it does get some criticism
for being melodramatic.
For being melodramatic, for being a bit indulgent, bloated. Indulgent from the standpoint of like Paul Thomas Anderson, just kind of like, in a sense, like I would say I can see how people would look at it kind of the same way that like something like Donnie Darko, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like Paul Thomas Anderson just had the chance to do whatever he wanted because Boogie Nights was a huge hit, and he just took it, and he just did whatever he wanted. I think it worked out very well, but the fact that it's 3 hours and there's so many characters and it ends with like such a weird biblical metaphor, there are people, detractors. I think it, has overall good reviews, but they're kind of like, it's like 7-8 territory,
I like that. Even if it's a Donnie Darko or whether it be Donnie Darko or Magnolia or Dune, or well, not Dune. He didn't get creative control on that. Whenever it's a director just going fucking ham, and even if it's pretentious, or even if it's bad, or even if it's good, I really like that.
Yeah.
I would much prefer a bad movie coming out of a director being so far up his own ass rather than a movie being bad because it's made by committee, you know?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I have an interest in seeing Gummo or Antichrist. And it's one of the reasons why I'm pretty sure I like My Own Private Idaho. And it's why I liked, among other things, because in general it's just kind of it's because of this. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, too. It was definitely Tobe Hooper just being like, I'm not going to give you another Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah. I hope you know if you give me money for another one, you're not going to get the same what you want out of it.
I talked about it probably recently on another podcast, but yeah, I just played through Metal Gear Solid 2 again, and that is my favorite thing about it. It's because that game is bad on purpose, because it's Kojima being super far up his own ass and being like, hey, people who really want sequels and people who really like idolize action heroes are fucking dumb, and I'm gonna tell you by making you play this really long, kind of shitty game. And a lot of people hate that game because they're like, hey, it's kind of long and shitty and kind of mean, and I love it for that.
Well, okay, so here's a couple of things I want to talk about real quick, and then we can get back to the movie a bit. One is that I really do want you to see Boogie Nights and then also Punch Drunk Love, because I'm 98% sure those are the two movies that sandwich this one. Okay. And it's so interesting because Boogie Nights is kind of like Magnolia Light in a lot of ways. You know, there's a decent amount of characters.
Isn't Don Cheadle in Boogie Nights?
Yeah.
Then I'm going to watch it.
Yeah.
I'll watch anything with Don Cheadle.
It does a neat thing. It really does do this neat thing. I'm not going to spoil, but just kind of forecast where the first like half of the movie takes place in the tail end of the 70s, and then New Year's happens, and then the last half, the 80s, are just dark and a big nightmare and just a big bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like Magnolia ends up being, again, like the more indulgent version of what everybody loved about Boogie Nights, right? Boogie Nights told a very tight story, even though it was a little, like I said, bloated with a lot of characters and a lot of moving parts. And then immediately after that, I've actually read a bit of the, I guess you'd call it lore. Punch Drunk Love is a very, very, very contained, simple, hour-and-a-half story. Yeah. It is bare bones, stripped back, right? Very little dialogue, kind of Drive-esque, but in melodrama form, I guess. But Paul Thomas Anderson set out to write what Punch Drunk Love was when he started Magnolia. Okay. And that's where Magnolia gets its name, because he says that it kept billowing out like a magnolia flower. And so, yeah, that's I don't know how to put it in a more elegant or like come to a finer point other than to say that I would like for you to see those two movies just for kind of context's sake.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And a larger statement I'd like to say about Paul Thomas Anderson is the fucking range. I haven't seen The Master, but I mean, even just like to go from Boogie Nights to like Magnolia, then to Punch Drunk Love, and then there's some stuff I'm forgetting, obviously, but like even making like There Will Be Blood and The Master, right? I feel like there's a lot of range there. Yeah. You know? I mean, just compare There Will Be Blood to Magnolia.
Yeah, no, exactly. You know? I always forget There Will Be Blood is Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd like to see The Master. I think you might have seen that one, right? That's the one that has the other Phoenix, not River.
Joaquin. And Philip Seymour Hoffman. Yeah. I have seen parts of The Master. Uh-huh. My dad used to allegedly steal a lot of movies. Yeah. And put like 5 or 6 on a disc. Mm-hmm. And I remember I would like be watching like season 1 of Scrubs. Uh-huh. And would fall asleep and wake up like 6 hours later. It would be halfway through The Master. So yeah, I've seen parts of it, but
very closely related to There Will Be Blood, only in the sense that like I don't remember the full backstory, but it was the idea that like I think he actually started The Master first and then did There Will Be Blood, and there were like something about like I can't remember entirely, like some scenes that were intended for one ending up in the other and stuff. There's just a bunch of neat little things that Paul Thomas Anderson talked about like that. But anyways, back to the actual movie. I also want to give a shout out to William H. Macy because we haven't talked about that much. Yeah. The last couple of days or the last week or whatever has actually been an interesting experience for me because I've now seen 2 films where William H. Macy does a really good job and really good movies and whatnot. And to this point, I've only known him as the guy who's in Magnolia because I've seen it a million times, and also Shameless.
He's also in the music video for All Star by Smash Mouth.
Interesting. And yeah, William H. Macy. Great actor.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm going to say. I like his scene where he breaks down and confesses his love and all that. When he's like, do you want to know what the common elephant? It's element is. He's like, it's, you know, whatever the fuck. And he's like, it's coal. It's in graphite, but then it's also in hardened form and diamonds and stuff like that. And I can teach you things. I know things and I can teach you things, whatever. But I will say that scene, for some reason, it just doesn't land. I don't understand the confusing Children of the Angels thing.
Yeah, same.
I really don't. I wish I did. It makes me feel dumb.
I was going to say, next to the other Whiz Kid, I'd say that's, for me, the weakest emotional moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's because, yeah, I don't understand that.
Well, and something that we discussed about real quick was that I feel like I always compared him to the other Whiz Kid, but I don't really think he mirrors the Whiz Kid. I think he mirrors John C. Reilly more.
Yeah.
Right? They're people who just both kind of like blindly love. They got all this love. They don't know where to put it. William H. Macy says that, right? And he basically treats the bartender the way that John C. Reilly treats the girl.
Yeah.
You know?
But he also mirrors...
and he's just as dumb. They're both very, very dumb, make huge mistakes.
Yeah, I think he also mirrors...
Fuck up their jobs.
At the same time, for different reasons, he mirrors the daughter and Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
The whole resentment against your parents thing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's all connected, Chris.
It is. There's so many little things like that.
I love... Quick shout-out. Love William H. Macy's glasses of this. They're just bright red for no reason. Love it. I do really like in the bar scene where he's saying the shit about graphite, like you were saying, or whatever the element was. It's going on and on and on, and he goes, "Oh yeah, thanks for all. Just needed the answer, Jimmy. Not all that information. All right, thanks." It's like, oh, great, love it. Mm-hmm. And I definitely thought he was gonna have braces in this movie, and I was like, oh god, I'm not gonna be able to sympathize with this adult with braces, and I'm glad they didn't do it.
Yes, yeah. I think there's also, for as much as, like I said, I can understand the criticism of it being like indulgent and long and kind of bloated. I think there's a lot of restraint.
Yeah,
a lot of subtlety. I really do. And at the end of the day, it's really just impressive. I mean, I couldn't imagine sitting down and writing something like that, and then just again having every character have all of these little subtle things.
Yeah,
these subtle psychologies and motivations that we can just sit here and talk about, you know?
Yeah.
It's super, super, super impressive. I love it.
Parts of it are really subtle, and there's a lot of restraint in parts, but also at the end, fucking frogs rain from the sky. It's so good.
Yes. So at the end of the day, for me, yeah, it's a movie about forgiveness and trauma and dealing with trauma, not dealing with trauma, but I guess which is also a way to try to deal with trauma, the interconnectivity of life, and yeah, just that, I guess, just the idea that we're all more in it together than we actually think. You know,
Yeah.
You can feel pretty alone sometimes, and yeah, you're alone. I'm not going to take it away from you. You are alone, but also in a lot of ways, we're a lot closer to each other than we think we are. And yeah, I think a decent portion. There's so many little moments, little lines that like I think are nice ways to like sum it up. Like the idea of the good book says, you know, we may be done with the past, but the past ain't done with us. Or at the end when John C. Reilly gives his whole speech, which is about him being a cop, but actually it's more of a metaphor for just being a person, right? The idea that like I got to make those calls. You know, when I'm on the clock, when I'm on the street, you know, that's the tough part. What can we forgive? All that stuff. And yeah, all of those things, I don't know, move me, resonate with me, feel true to life, true to my experience, you know? And it just fucking gets me.
I would say, if I had any real complaints with this movie, I would take it from 3 hours and 10 minutes to about 3 hours and 8.5 minutes. And it would cut out that garbage where they're all fucking singing the same song for some reason.
I forgot about that.
I don't know what that... only part of the movie, in my head, I was like, this shit's whack. I don't know why. I don't know why. It really took me out of it for a good minute and a half. I was like, oh, no. Is the last half of this movie, is the last third of this movie gonna be a musical? Because if not, what the fuck is this?
Like I say, it immediately reminds me of the scene in Donnie Darko when everybody's waking up from the Donnie Darko dream. And
Yeah.
like, all around me is familiar faces.
Well, that's just like a moody needle drop, and that's more acceptable. If it was just the song and it showed everybody, that'd be fine. But everybody is singing the song. Yeah, I don't like any of that.
Yeah. Also, shouts out Amy Mann for that soundtrack.
Yeah.
I regularly listen to the one in the trailer, the one that's like, God, what's the lyric? It's a really neat lyric. It's like, and I know life is getting shorter. I can't bring myself to break routine, even when it's approaching torture. I've got my routine, maybe, or something like that. I can't remember, but
I think I was reading. I think it's Amy Mann. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was very inspired listening. Paul Thomas Anderson was very inspired by her music while writing this, and I think there are a few lines of dialogue in this movie that are straight up just lyrics from some of her songs.
Yeah, I think she won an Academy Award for the soundtrack. Very and cool. Also, just a little fun fact, Wise Up was used in Community. So,
yeah.
It's not going to stop till you wise up.
Ooh, fuck, I had a really good segue that you were probably going to shoot down. Do you have more to say about Magnolia?
Do I have more to say about Magnolia? I'm sure I could go on about it for a while. I hope to God that what I can only assume was incoherent rambling was worth listening to, and that I got most of what I wanted to say out. I hope. I can only hope. Hey, it's Chris. I found this fucking tape in our backyard, so it sounds like dog shit, and I'm sorry. So, why don't you start by talking about your experience with it?
The Blair Witch Project.
You've seen before.
I have claimed to have seen before. I'm not sure I did. There's a movie Chris is always going,
I think you might have. I mean, it's such a short movie.
Yeah. And I remember seeing it and thinking not much of it. Like, you know, I get it. It's one of the original found footage movies, and it's, you know, the gold standard for them. But I was like, it's a movie from 1999.
Why do you reckon? Can you remember anything? Like, you're about to, obviously, go into it a little bit, but can you remember?
It just didn't hold any weight to me. I thought it was pretty minimal and like, ooh, there's a spooky sound here. Ooh, there's a spooky sound here. And like, it's very slowly trying to build tension, and I just wasn't invested in any of it from what I remember. And I remember almost like the original Halloween, where, you know, I get it, but at the same time, I've seen so many other things that have come after Halloween.
Yeah.
That, like, my biggest example for this is always Anchorman.
Yeah.
I didn't see Anchorman until after Anchorman 2 came out. Mm-hmm. And everyone always going, it's the funniest movie ever. And I watch it, I'm like, I've seen 1,000 movies exactly like this. Yeah. So much so that this isn't funny to me. Like, I don't find Anchorman funny.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought of Blair Witch, but then me and you watched it like last week, 2 weeks ago maybe?
Something like that, yeah.
Fucking scariest movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It is so good.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, maybe I was just more invested in it. Like you said, we might have watched it with several other people last time.
Which, on a side note, before we get into it, that's something I want to mention too. Like, so I've seen the Blair Witch Project a lot, many, many times. And one of the last 3 times I saw it, I think I watched it within the last year. Once because my partner and I bought it on VHS, and we were like, oh, that'd be dope, yeah. Twice because my younger sister and her boyfriend know that I'm a horror hound. And they're all like, you know, Danielle's always like, I'm a woman of science, you know, like but they still like playing with it a little bit because how much I like it. It's kind of cute. So they were like, show us the scariest movie. So my dad, me, and Alicia were all like, The Blair Witch Project, Jinx, Yomi a Coke, 2 pinches, 1 back, Naomi a Sprite, whatever the fuck, right? But yeah, in unison, we were all basically just like, The Blair Witch Project! And just fell totally flat, right?
Yeah.
I'll talk more about that later, but yeah, they were just like, to this day, Alex, my sister's boyfriend, says it's the worst movie he's ever seen. But to take it back to my original point was that, like, they asked the same thing recently. They're going off to college, like 6 hours away from here. They leave Wednesday. Tuesday I have plans to see them, and you know, they want us to like bring a scary movie. They want to watch another scary movie, very scary movie. Excuse me.
And I just keep thinking, like, I don't know how well scary movies work in general when you see them with other people. Not, excuse me, not like one, I don't know, maybe like one other person, but like, you know, when you do like a group of 3, 4, 5, I don't know, you feel kind of fortified, safe, you know, I think it doesn't land as much. And similarly, it's one of two problems, I think, that your viewing experience with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre had. One of them is that, like I said, you got to kind of like recalibrate, you know, your expectations and stuff, and kind of understand the context. Same thing with the Blair Witch Project. But the other being that, like, I don't know, we watched it with like me and Megan. You guys are smoking dope. Megan's not really into old movies, and I feel like, you know, you kind of like, you know, you're hanging out with like one or two people, like maybe like Jordan would be a good example. Like, but I think, you know, the fact that Megan's not really into old movies also works for. It's just that thing where like you might be more inclined to be like, oh, this is stupid. Like, it reminds me of a story Kevin Smith told about, or maybe it wasn't Kevin Smith. I don't know, they saw, I can't remember what fucking movie they saw, but there's this story about like Chris Rock and like all of those guys, like while they were filming Dogma or something like that, going to see this movie and just ripping into it the whole time they were watching it. And then a couple of them individually saw it a second time, kind of alone in a better context, and they're like, holy shit, like I can't believe I thought this was one of the worst movies I've ever seen when I was, you know, and now I'm seeing it alone, and I'm like, oh my god, this is, you know, genuinely good.
Yeah, I'd like to rewatch Texas Chainsaw Massacre at some point. Because same thing with Halloween. The first time I saw Halloween, I was like, I get it, but also, I don't really get it. But as time goes on and I get more appreciation for it and I've seen it more, I'm like, oh, you know, this movie's fucking spooky. I get it.
So one of the things I want to start off by saying is that I think one of the blessing/curse elements of the Blair Witch Project is the same thing with the X-Files. To quote Camille Nanjiani with the X-Files files, it's that thing where he calls the X-Files the last great pre-internet TV show, right? Where like half the reason why it works is because every episode is predicated on like Mulder and Scully basically doing what could happen to you back in the day if you were just on a road trip. You stop to take a piss, suddenly you're in this weird town. And yeah, of course there's not a fucking werewolf or like but it just, you get this vibe of like, geez, these people live in like a totally different world than I do. Yeah. This is weird. Like, it almost feels like a forgotten place. Now with like, you know, the strip mallification and Google Maps kind of thing, and everybody's kind of lost its charm, and it just feels like backwoods Trump land everywhere. But same thing with like the Blair Witch. The first strength that I want to like comment on is that if these teens are just lost in the woods, horrifying. Already, like that's a movie in and of itself. Like, you know, even just the idea that the main girl, what's her name? I know that one of them is Mike.
It's Mike, Josh. Heather, I believe.
Heather keeps claiming to be able to read a map, right?
Yeah.
And for all she knows, she could think she knows how to read a map. Maybe she was in the Girl Scouts. Maybe her dad showed her. Maybe she had a couple of classes. You know, maybe she does know how to read a map a little bit. But being able to read a map a little bit is a lot different than, oh shit, suddenly I'm a little lost, right? Like I kind of lost my place and I think we're here.
Yeah.
Well, that's a big discrepancy. You know what I mean? What I'm saying is like, they're probably city kids. Like, yes, they may have a couple of skills, but it would be very, very easy and believable for Heather to lose her spot on that map, right?
Exactly.
And it's just built on that foundation of just like little slips and like believable this, that, and the other. To the point where I even read that most of the script, it was shot on like a 28-page script.
Yeah.
It's all improv.
Yeah.
You had an interesting thing about that when you were talking about their arguing. Well, after we watched it, you were like, I was watching those argument scenes and I was like, holy shit, this is so like real. Like the way that they're yelling at each other, like I would be this pissed.
Yeah. It reminded me of, it's one of those first episodes of The Twilight Zone where the guy is the last man on Earth, and he's just running into rooms screaming and stuff like that. And I remember watching that and being like, fuck, that's exact. Like, you don't think about it, but like, yeah, if things got that bad, that's what would happen. And I think like some of the most intense parts of the Blair Witch are them just arguing with each other. And like, especially in the beginning where they're just like, no man, I'm not scared, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I want to get to the car. And it's like, oh no, these people are terrified.
Yeah.
And like, even as it goes on, when they're just like hysterical, like trying to keep themselves together, just like, again, like regardless of there being a witch out here, we're going to die in the woods. And it works really well with like the whole fuck, we've been walking south all day and we're right back where we started. I like the, maybe that's like, some spooky...
Such a cliche, but that's so effective, and I think they do it very well, where it's like, if that like, I've seen that happen in movies where like, I think we're exactly where, then it doesn't land, but I think it works so well in that.
And even if you take that out of it, like other horror movies, like a haunted house or whatever, it's just like, you can watch it and be like, get the fuck out of the house.
Yeah.
Or get the fuck out of here. With
this movie, they're trying.
It's like, oh, fuck. Yeah, no, like, you are fucked. And like, that's, like, more than any other movie, a horror movie I've seen, is like, when you really empathize with these people and you really, like, think about yourself in that situation. Yeah. It is so fucking scary. And like, apart from that, just that general concept, I think maybe the scariest parts of this movie are when they're in the tent. Like, every night when they're in the tent, and it's like, oh fuck, we hear something over there, and then we hear something over there.
Thinking about it. Because to this day, that and The Conjuring are the only two movies that genuinely scare me. Yeah. That I genuinely am uncomfortable by.
Yeah, and it's them just sitting in there, and it's like dead quiet, and like you hear just them rustling a little bit in the tent, and then you just hear like...
Or when you hear like rocks.
You hear rocks.
Or twigs.
Or you hear just like mumbles or whatever, and then you hear that baby, and one of them is just like, no, there can't be a fucking baby in the woods. It's like, oh fuck, that's so good.
Because me just personally, like, I'm a horror hound. I love digging around on Reddit and finding like, ooh, what's the scariest thing that ever happened to you and stuff. And sometimes they'll even have the caveat of like, people who solo hike or whatever. Like, what's the scariest thing that happened to you? And like, 100% one of my biggest fears is I'm in the woods and I see a guy. Yeah. There's just a guy or something, right? Just to be fair, like, I'm even talking like, oh, I'm on a hiking trail and I pass another guy. But if you're just straight up in the middle of nowhere and you see a guy. Yeah. Or like even, I mean, they do it in Blair Witch too, but if like, say you're out in the woods and you see a pile of sticks that couldn't have been put in a pile by anything other than a man or a woman, that's horrifying. And, she kicks over the sticks and that, or she kicks over the rocks and that's scary, but like, back to them being in the tent, it's like, and like, you definitely get in that mindset too, where it's like... Would you want to leave the tent?
Like, yeah, because it's like, I cannot leave this tent, but at the same time, it's like, there's no way I'm safe in this tent, it's just a tent. It's like, you can't leave the tent, and there's that part where like, something comes and like, starts pushing on the side of the tent. Horrifying. Oh, fucking horrifying,
And I also like that they come to the conclusion, like, let's not even light a fire. Like, let's not even bring attention to us. Because again, I don't want to spend too much time with the review talking about anecdotal this and stories that, but it reminds me of a Reddit story I read one time about a guy solo hiking, and he's on the side of the lake, and he can see this little light traveling from the other side of the lake, and he's like, well, kind of seems like it might be coming this way, so he backs off like 50 yards and hides in a bush and sees a guy come over and whatnot, and the guy like rummages through his shit and stuff like that, and then fucks off, and he can see the light traveling back to the other side and stuff like that. And it's one of those things that always keeps me from being interested in like camping not at a campsite. It's just that if I build a fire, if there is a murder out here, I'm basically saying, hey, come murder. Yeah, exactly. But yes, to talk more about the movie itself, to maybe take it back to the beginning, one of the things that I really like is just all of the people they got around town to just like, the world building, I guess, is what I want to get at. Is just like, like the mother they interview and whatnot, or the guys down by the river. Like, of course, there's a little bit of like, oh, this is like, it seems Clerks level a little bit, where it's like, these are just, probably some actors who answered an ad or whatever. But by and large, you're kind of like, this feels pretty fucking real. This also feels like maybe these people just don't really know how to talk on camera a little bit. Exactly. And it's one of those things where like, because of how well they build the world, you almost expect it to be like real folklore that they built on. Yeah. And to a degree, it is connected with like a little bit, I guess, but not. It's almost like any horror movie. They took quite a bit of license with what the folklore is. But even that shit's uncomfortable. Like that, there's that one guy who straight up feels like he's out of Clerks. He's wearing like a backwards cap, and he's like, "Yeah, so he used to take kids up there. I don't know, something like 2x2 or something, and then he'd make one of them like stand in the corner or something like that while he killed the other one or whatever." And like just so many little like seeds that they plant like that is just like scary. Or like the old lady that they interview at the trailer park. I don't remember her name. Like whatever. She's the town kook. Yeah, she's the crazy woman. And she's like, and I turned around and she said she had hair, like horse hair, like black hair, like all of it is so creepy, and we're not even in the woods yet.
Yeah, the one that gets me the most is like it's scary seeing it, but also at the same time it's just like thinking about it of like making this movie kind of standpoint. It's like, oh, that's so good, and like you just happen to get that shot with that lady that's talking and she's got a baby in her arm. She's talking and the baby's fussing the whole time, and when she starts like talking about the witch, the baby like starts covering her mouth. It's like, oh, that's so fucking good.
Yes.
I think something that really, like, I thinking about it, the thing that gets me the most is, I guess, the actors and how legitimately terrified they seem the entire time. Like I said, it starts slow where they kind of deny that they're scared or whatever. Where at some point, I think it's Josh goes, "Are you not scared enough? Can't we just do this or whatever?" And like when they find the house and they're looking for Josh in the house. Realistically, think about it. Me in that situation, I'd be like, all right, if we're going in there to get Josh, I don't want anything knowing we're in this house. So you sneak in and you look around and try to find Josh, and then an oogie boogie gets you. But they're in there fucking screaming at the top of their
I think
lungs.
specifically her, right?
Yeah, she's screaming, but he's like, he's downstairs.
Yeah.
Come on, let's go. It's like, oh my god, like just petrified he is.
Yeah.
Fuck, I keep having a point and I keep losing it. Say something while I think.
Yes, and you know, one of the things I like a lot too is like the whole she keeps filming thing.
Oh, that's
and
what
I
I
don't
was gonna say. Yeah.
really like the whole like, oh, it's all I have left thing, but I do really like. I think it's Josh's point of him being like, I see why I like this camera so much. It's almost like it's not real.
Yeah.
You know.
That's what I was gonna say. Every found footage movie you see, the whole time you're like, why are you still filming? Why are these people still filming? But like in the Blair Witch Project, both of them like, why are you still filming?
Yeah.
Why are you doing
I
this?
like how much tension is being built by like her still filming.
Yeah, and I do like her saying, I do like her saying it's all I have left, and
I do like her being like, oh, I want to get this, oh, I want to get this, oh, I want to get this, but like when she starts like very desperate being like, it's all I have left, I'm like, oh, that's a little melodramatic in my opinion. But yes, I like it up until that line kind of, and I also like the tension, and I also like him being like, oh, it's almost like it's not real. Because that's kind of the thing. There are a lot of people, you know, like that they're like, you know, like, oh, I kind of want to be haunted. I kind of want to know it's real, you know. And it is definitely believable that she would want to get some of that on camera or whatnot.
Yeah.
You know. So I think it really does work. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I still want to give the first Paranormal Activity some credit.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I would say that it's probably. I've not seen a lot of found footage. I've seen Cloverfield or whatever. That one works too. I don't know. But for some reason, I guess the reasons we're talking about, like, this one just hits so much harder. Like, way harder. It's way grittier and real. And I think it's a combination of, like, the marketing around it, the fact that it had a lot of people kind of convinced that it was a real thing, you know. And so during my childhood, it was, like, a real thing, you know, in my head at least. And then also the improv and the fact that all these actors, like, play it off so natural that, like, just, it's like this perfect soup of just believable.
Yeah. And I think even without that it works, because when we were watching it, I was petrified. I was on my phone like looking up like behind the scenes stuff to like try to like pull me out of it a little bit, and it was not working at all.
Yeah.
And I think I like in horror movies and like found footage stuff. But it's that old, you know, adage about horror movies. It's like once you see the ghost, once you know what's going on, it gets way less scary. But I think if they hold back on it too much, it could be to its detriment. Like, I've heard this about the Blair Witch, like, as a criticism, where it's like, there's nothing to be afraid of. You don't know what's going on the entire time. And I get that, and, like, you know, how it ends with the famous shot of him in the corner, and then the camera falls, and then it's over. And I've heard some people be like, well, yeah, that's an unsatisfying ending, because it's like, fuck, well, okay, but, like, you don't know what's going on. But me, personally, I love it, because when that happens, when the camera falls and then it cuts to black, I'm not like, well, what the fuck was that? I'm like, oh, thank God this is over. Like, I'm like, okay, yeah, they died, whatever. There's a witch, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I didn't see it, whatever. I don't have to see any of this again. No. I'm excited. Great. Yeah. It got me.
No, I love it because they planted that seed of the whole, like, oh, they make the one look in the corner where you see Josh in the corner. And it's just like, oh, shit. Which, again, is a little, like, plot holy because, as I said while we were watching it, with the whole backstory of, like, oh, he killed them 2 by 2 and he couldn't stand the eyes on him, like someone watched him, so he'd make one of them look in the corner. Just don't take 2 in the basement at a time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But no, I think it works really well that you never see the witch because it's not... I think in horror movies, there are monster movies and there are, like, serial killer movies and slashers and whatnot. Yeah. And then there's also just ghosts, paranormal, like, witches, like... There's a chance the witch doesn't even necessarily take, like, a physical form. There's also a chance that they're just going insane, you know what I mean?
There's a chance that that the 2 dudes are trying to kill Heather.
There you go. Yeah, that's a little fan theory. But yeah, I like that they don't show anything because I think that, again, lends to its, like, credibility and its, like, believability. Because in the real world, people say they see ghosts and stuff like that, but we generally think those kinds of people are, like, kooks or whatever.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're just home alone. I'm sure you've experienced this where you're like, what was that noise?
Yeah, it was on the podcast the other day.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, the fact that the movie is just grounded in that kind of a thing where it's like, am I really hearing what I'm hearing? Yeah. Is this going on? Am I, like, what is this? Like, could that just be a deer? You know, whatever. What's going on? Like, just the fact that it stays, like... It just has the in my opinion, the good sense to, like, hold back a little bit.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, I did read a little bit of trivia that there was supposed to be a scene where they show the witch.
Yeah.
Like, the director or something like that was dressed up in some little thing, and he was, like, running at Heather in one scene, and there's a scene where she's running through the woods, and she, like, out of nowhere goes, Wah! Like she saw something.
Yeah, she says,
but the camera just never, the camera never pans over. It was supposed to, but it didn't. And again, I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because, again, like, I just feel like that would make it goofy. Silly,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if they ever did show the witch, now it's a monster in the woods.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's like paranormal activity. Most of the the horror from this comes out of necessity because of the budget or because, like, they fucked this shot up and they don't have a chance to get another one.
One of my favorite parts in the Paranormal Activity is when they put the flower on the ground and you can just see the footprints happening in the flower. Oh.
I know it's not the movie we're supposed to be talking about, but
yeah,
I love Paranormal Activity. It's such a smart little design, but you have the numbers at the bottom, the time from the camera, and it's just speeding up the entire time. And then when it stops, you're like, oh shit,
yeah.
Oh shit.
No. I'd like to rewatch that one. I really would. It's been a while.
Didn't we watch all of them in a row?
Up to a point. There might be, like, a couple of, like, more recent ones that we couldn't find on streaming services, but I think we watched up to, like, 5.
I think, we watched, I think...
There could be more, I don't know.
Yeah, we watched the first one and I was like, well, fuck, that was good, let's watch 2. And the 2 was okay.
An immediate, I feel like, drop down.
Each one's half as good as the last. Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where, like, it reminds me of, I just watched 80% of the Amityville Horror last night.
Yeah.
Awful dog shit movie. There are 10 movies in that franchise.
Yeah.
After, like, the third one, they're direct-to-video.
Okay.
And I don't know, I can't speak on that, but I can speak on the Halloween franchise. I personally just hate whenever a horror franchise is focused on, like, one family. It's just like, come on, really? This is going to keep happening for just, like, 20 years of somebody's life? I think it's a little bit more, I don't know, believable or enjoyable when it's something like, I don't know, Nightmare on Elm Street, where it's like, there's a street where this happens. Yeah. Or like Friday the 13th, it's like camp, because in real life lore, like, that happens way more often than, like, a family being terrorized for 20 years. That a place is where evil lives.
Yeah, and it's also like, you could yourself stumble upon Elm Street or into wherever Michael Myers lives. You are never in your life going to become part of that family, you know.
And so that's one of the problems I think Paranormal Activity has, is that, like, for some reason it's like, in the second movie it's like, oh, her sister. Now her family's being whatever.
Yeah, back
and then
in
in the
the
next movie,
80s,
it's like her aunt or something.
Yeah.
The next
Yeah,
movie,
that woman shows up. I think that's what happens with the second one ends, and there's a cliffhanger with her, and she's like, "Oh, she's the big bad ghost now." And it's like, "Well, fuck, now I gotta watch 3." And you watch 3, and it's not really connected. And there's a cliffhanger with her and a cult now, and it's like, "Oh fuck, now I gotta watch 4." There's a cliffhanger with her, and it's like, "I gotta watch 5." And there's a cliffhanger with her, and then we gave up. I think
We're so far from the Blair Witch Project, but real quick, want to make a side note. I don't know. I'm just making a claim, but I feel like, having now seen the Amityville Horror or most of it, and The Conjuring, I feel like I can kind of tell that the Warrens were like little con men.
Yeah.
Because those are basically the same story.
Yeah.
In a sense, right? What happens in the Amityville Horror is that the dad is being possessed by the horror there and slowly going crazy and wants to kill the family. Just like the mom in The Conjuring who wanted to kill the kids or whatever. The other thing is that in the basement there's something wrong. Eventually they find out that it's a portal where evil comes and goes and whatnot. And yeah, like, house has a similar layout, but even like first night, second night or something like that, there's like some reason why the dad wants to go check out the basement, you know, coming down the basement and stuff like that. Kid falls down the basement and knocks the light out, just like, you know, when the mom kind of gets trapped down there from falling and the light goes out at the same time. There's just a lot of like little beats like that where I'm like, sounds like the Warrens kept telling the same story but with different families, you know. But I don't know enough about them at large. All I know is that many times over, the Amityville has been proven to be, you know, a hoax that they made it up to sell a book. Same thing with The Conjuring. A lot of those stories. But anyways, back to the
Blair Witch.
Blair Witch. Yeah, so like I said, I feel like I'm parroting something I said earlier, but yeah, I like that it's this location where evil lives. There's this folklore surrounding it, this world building. The kids go out into it. And yeah, like, it's, as we've talked about before, you've mentioned before, like the thing with ghosts that's scary is like, oh, home is where you're supposed to be safe, you know, right? And yeah, this is like the other side of the coin, right? Where like you go to the evil, right? This is where evil lives or whatever. Yeah. And yeah, spooky fucking movie.
Like I think, yeah, with Blair Witch, it's like in horror movies, it's at night you're fucked, during the day you're safe. Something I really like about The Conjuring, there's a point in The Conjuring where a bunch of spooky shit starts happening to the whole family, and they go, and they run out of the house, and it's the middle of the day. But in the Blair Witch, it's very much so, spooky shit happens at night, you're safe during the day, but like we keep saying, spooky witch shit happens at night, during the day, you're lost in the fucking woods, and it's gonna be night eventually.
Oh yeah, that actually does remind me of one last thing I want to mention about it, is like, I like that, again, it's something you've said already, I've said already, but there's a specific way I want to articulate it. Again, they're so believably lost, right? Like, they talk about how they're hungry, how they're out of cigarettes, but there's never any, like, tacky scenes where they're like, well, how much food do we have left? Like, oh my god, I gotta eat. Like, what do we have? Like, they're solely focused on, like, if we keep walking, we have to end up out of these woods. Yeah. And again, it's so believable. Like, I feel like if you're lost in the woods, like, that's the mode you get into, where it's like, we have to walk in one direction. It's 1999 or whatever, 96 or whatever, like, civilization, you know, wilderness doesn't exist like that in America anymore. We have to bump into a fucking speedway or someone's house or something. Like, let's keep walking. Eventually we have to find whatever.
And that's why the whole trick of we were walking south all day, we're in the same spot, works so well, because it's like, oh no, that's not an option anymore. You were just in these woods. And that's, you know, toward the end where they start getting like really, really fucking, they start really losing it. Like, yeah, again, that's just maybe the scariest part to me is just watching them lose hope, but at the same time keep trying to talk themselves and each other through, like, okay, we're just gonna do this, we're gonna get out of here, and just like crying in the middle of saying that, and just being like, or then like seconds later being like, we're gonna fucking die out here. And what's his face laughing during it, because he's like, oh, you know, I got rid of the map, guys. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, they got rid of the map thing. That's something that, like, also, our neighbors. Anyways, works into, like, almost all three of, like, the possibilities. Like, A, they're just lost and frustrated and mad and hungry and stuff like that. And like I could see, not necessarily me doing it, but like I can almost put myself in those shoes. Like if like our friend, the not very smart one, was the guy who was like, I know how to read a map, I might get to the point where I just fucking threw the map away. Because I'd be like, no, you fucking don't. Yeah. You just fucking don't. I could, we're 5 days into it, and he's like, no, guys, I can really need them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, I could get to the point where I'm like, no, you don't. You fucking don't. You know what I mean? And that's scary. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because that's just, like, normal, to a degree, like I said, trying to really put yourself in the shoes. It's kind of like normal human behavior in a sense. Like, you can really almost get there, right? Let's say there's a witch in a, forest or whatever. The whole thing where, like, possession or just not thinking straight, it's just kind of that thing where, like, the supernatural plays tricks on you, compasses don't work, whatever, yada yada. Or also they're just out there to murder Heather. Yeah. And they're just kind of playing mind games, and they're really just trying to fuck with their, Scream style.
I don't like that theory so
Neither
much.
Do I.
But it does make sense.
It works into all three almost.
Yeah. If you watch it, it makes sense that they got rid of the map, or they're leading her this way or that way, or they won't let her have the compass and stuff like that.
Oh fuck! Again, okay. More just little details like that I love. I love, and you mentioned it too, so I'm kind of stealing your thing. But I also love it when Josh is just like, bro, I have to be to work in the morning, and then like the next day he's like, all right, I didn't show up to work today. I didn't call my girlfriend. Someone's gonna be looking for us. Yeah. Know where we're at. You know what I mean? And like again, that's just so spooky, and it doesn't even speak to the paranormal. It just speaks to the being lost, like that thing where you're just like, someone's got to care, someone's got to look, right? Like I'm not showing up to work today. They got to be coming, right? They got to be coming, right? They got to,
Yeah, just like the realization of like, oh yeah, fuck, they're at that point where like, oh yeah, they're lost in the woods, and the rationalizing like, oh, somebody has to be looking for us. Oh.
That gets me, and then to take a step back from that strength and just talk about a little bit of like atmospheric. I know it's cultural, but it's so effective, and it really gets me. I love that horror movies are always kind of set in the autumn. Yeah. You know what I mean? Things are cold, leaves are gone, right? And even just something I love, maybe it's more nostalgia than anything, is like when they're hanging out in the town, all the like cheap little Halloween decorations and stuff. There's just something about that time. And I just recently actually learned that in Japan, I believe summertime is more their spooky time. That's when they tell scary stories and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know, there's something about the overcast and the fact that like at night, like, or even during the day, they're all bundled up because it's cold. It's really fucking cold. And it's rainy. All the trees. It's wet. And they're crossing little streams and stuff. And
trees not having leaves on them is way scarier.
Yeah. But even to go back into like the movie and whatnot, like again, you're just lost. And there's something about it, like I don't know if they're like, I think they were legitimately just out camping for like 8 days shooting it or whatever, but like they look a little grimy, they look a little sweaty, they look like they're wet, they look like they've been walking around for days. And again, that alone is scary enough. And then on top of it, it's just that thing where like, let me compare it to the Amityville Horror. 10 minutes into that movie, there's a scene where like the priest comes to the house to like bless it or whatever. And he's like choking, and there's flies everywhere, and he's got to like run out of the house because he's sick and stuff, and yada yada yada. And my partner like turned to me and she was like, she thought that they were going to kill him off already. I was like, I don't think they're gonna kill him off, but she was like, already? And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is pretty intense for 10 minutes into the movie. But again, like the Blair Witch Project just starts off so slow. Like you're like, okay, there's all these spooky stories surrounding the woods. Okay, they're in the woods. Okay, like they think they might have heard something last night. Okay, now they're getting a little stressed about how like lost they are. Oh, they definitely heard something tonight. Oh, they're definitely lost today. Oh shit, like what's all that noise? Oh god, they're really lost, right? But it never really like breaks that. There's never like a release to the tension like a slasher movie has, right? Like it's the build up, kill. And then everything's kind of reset, right? And you gotta build tension again, kind of, and hang out, and oh, suddenly you get the POV shot, and like, oh shit, someone's about to get killed. They're gone, right? Instead, like, yeah, the Blair Witch, in its short, like, hour 20, it's just kind of like ramping up. There's really no release until kind of the house, the camera falls over, and like, it just keeps building. Day and night. building.
Yeah, like they even lose a person.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't feel like a release. It's
Mm-mm.
because you don't see it happen. They just wake up and Josh is gone.
Oh, so scary. Again, you're just lost. Forget the witch part of it.
Yeah.
You wake up one day, and one of the people that you're lost with is gone.
Yeah.
And it's believable, too, because what if Josh said, like, in the middle of the night, fuck this, whatever, I'm just going to go. Like, because, again, I could almost put myself in those shoes and be like, there might be even a point where I'm like, fuck these people, I'm going to go, I can get myself home. Yeah. I can figure out how to get back to the house, or something. I'm not saying I would. I probably wouldn't. I'm a coward. I want to stay with the group.
I was going to say, no, I cannot imagine a situation where I'm like, I'm going to go.
But you could imagine someone doing it.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, maybe Elton or something, just getting so annoyed at a certain point, just be like, whatever, I'm fucking surrounded by idiots. I'm getting myself back to the car. I know the woods. I know where I went. You know, like.
I don't know if they say it in the movie or not, or if I just thought this, but when they hear Josh screaming in the woods, do they say something like, "Oh, that's not Josh"?
Yeah, they're talking about, they're like, no fucking way, that can't be Josh. That's not Josh. And again, like, that's one of those things that, like, maybe it is just Josh. It probably is just Josh, right? But also, like, I know enough about, like, spooky shit and supernatural shit to know that, like, one of the biggest things that they always bring up in a lot of these scary stories is that, you know, spirits or demons or whatever you want to call it can, like, mimic familiar voices to, like, get you to, like, let me give you an example, excuse me. I was just reading a scary story while I was on vacation in the middle of the night to, you know, my brothers and my sisters and my girlfriend and stuff. And the story was about this young girl who used to hang out with this girl and her family, and they had this weird thing where, like, if they were called from the other room, they wouldn't be like, what? Or whatever. They would just go and see. And the story progresses to them being home alone, and they think they hear the little girl's mom calling from her, and they're like, oh, she must be home. And they walk through the house to where the calling's coming from, and no one's home, actually. And then they go sit on the porch, and they have ice cream and stuff like that, and the little girl's just like, yeah, you know how you always make fun of me for that? Well, that's because in our culture, we believe that, like, evil spirits and, like, demons and stuff like that can call out to you, and if you answer, then they can take you, kind of a thing, or whatever. And then, you know, it ends with her saying something like, yeah, but have you ever thought about, like what if you, like, went and then you saw your mom, but it wasn't your mom, and apparently she hadn't, because she started crying, yada, 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 or whatever. But again, it's one of those things where, like, when they're saying, like, that can't be Josh and stuff like that, yeah, to a degree, like, can't be Josh, like, what if it, you know?
I think they say that, and then later the voice starts going, follow the sound of my voice. Like, ooh, absolutely not, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's one of those tells, right, where you're like, yeah, no, that's a demon for sure. I'm staying in the tent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's also funny to think about the demon just like, help, over here, over here, and they're just running circles in the woods. He's like, God damn it. Follow the sound of my voice.
That is very funny.
And something I think we brought up a few times while watching it is, like, just thinking about, like, the making of an aspect, like how they just, like, you know, I think they were, from what I read, they, like, woke up every morning and, like, there'd be envelopes waiting for them outside of their tent with, like, what you're supposed to do today and what headspace you're in or whatever. And then at night when they're in the tent, like, you know, the directors would be, like, throwing rocks at the tent and, like, playing shit off of a boom box. And so, yeah, like, a lot of them being, like, unnerved and scared is probably just actually those actors. Yeah. And to think about being Mike, I think, and just asleep in the tent, and Heather decides, you know what, I'm going to wake up and record this spooky video real close to my face.
You're listening to it? Yeah.
I'd be so pissed.
Yeah. But again, like I say, like, another fun fact that I kind of read was that I think it was, like, 2 people mainly who, like, came up with the idea and, like, wrote it out kind of and had the whole thing going. And it was just born out of, like, a mutual agreement that, like kind of, like, documentary horror is a bit scarier than, like, a movie or whatever. And I guess I could be wrong, but being as much of a horror hound as I am, like I said, like, I've been exposed to a lot of, like, scary stories and movies and stuff like that. And again, I just feel like at every turn they specifically chose restraint and, like, the least tacky scare and stuff like that. And, you know, all the examples that I've given of other folklore and other ghost stories that, like, this plays into and kind of ties into, again, it, like, that's probably my favorite aspect of this movie. It's just at every turn, I'm like, fuck, they chose the scariest goddamn thing.
Yeah.
And I've read so many stories, and like each one of these little scares or little decisions are the fucking things that, the one thing that gets me out of like a spooky story or something, where like I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, this is a little tacky, you know, this isn't really believable. Well, that one thing, if you just think about that one thing, that part's the scary part.
Yeah.
This whole movie's the fucking scary part.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's the Blair Witch.
That's the Blair Witch. Yeah, I couldn't recommend it enough, but to go back to what we were talking about in the beginning, one of the biggest things I think, if you know, you haven't seen it, is just it exists in such a sort of like foreign context almost.
Yeah.
That should be timeless, but right now, I think it is timeless, but right now, with everything that's like immediately available to us and in front of us, it's kind of hard to really kind of break that like, oh come on aspect of it. You know. Again, it exists in a time, you know, I don't even want to talk about like it being the first found footage or it being like the gold standard or anything like that. It's more so just like, imagine, you know, with your modern sensibilities, like I can't think of a great example or whatever, but you just woke up tomorrow and for some reason smartphones just didn't work anymore. Yeah. You know. What would that camping trip be like?
Well,
you
no,
know, or what would that...
I've never been in a wooded area where my phone worked.
Yeah,
so I feel like
fair.
it works in that sense.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where like I just don't. What I'm trying to say is like I don't think 2021 makes this movie not work, but it seems like from most of the experiences that I've had trying to show people this, for some reason it doesn't.
I think more so what it is it's not that like, ooh, kids can't imagine what it's like being without their phone.
Yeah.
I think kids could do that. I think it's the Anchorman problem that I said earlier. And I think if you're going to watch this movie, watch it alone, or with a roommate who watches everything at like full blast, because that was super scary.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it. On a side note, that kind of like lends into like just getting sucked into it. Yeah. When it's too quiet and I'm like straining to hear it, it becomes more apparent to me that it's like a movie. Yada yada yada.
Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me. Definitely. So yeah, highly recommend.
Yeah.
Great movie. Thanks for making me watch it again.
Yeah.
Glad we watched it instead of Frankenstein. I'd like to watch Frankenstein one of these days. But
yeah, that one's a little. We'll talk about that another time, I guess. You want to rate it?
Rate it?
Yeah.
Out of
maybe just grades. Grades might be better. You know.
I'd give it a solid A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd give it like an A+.
Yeah.
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 Because I feel like with grades as opposed to like a ranking or like a number score, like, well, I guess number score works too. I don't know. I think grade just has an added connotation of like whatever it was going for, this is how well it did at it, right? And it's a little less hierarchical and like, oh, this movie's better than that movie, yada yada yada. You know. So yeah, A+ movie. Go get spooked.
Tell your friends.
Learn how to read a map.
Learn how to read a map. Just don't, you know, I'll do you one better. Don't go in the woods. That's all you gotta do. Sit out of there. There's nothing for us in there anymore.
If you need more soup, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or go to our website, eatingsoupalone.com. And until next time,